And so then we stripped the rest of the machine down. We took the big horizontal bar off. In fact, all the bars, everything came off of it. If it was real dinged, even had some dips in it that had to be taken out. So everybody had to really paint and fill and paint and fill and scrape and all that stuff, but they worked out beautifully. You couldn't tell the difference. The bars that go along the bottom were in actually pretty good shape, except they were really dinged up. They just weren't painted correctly. We stripped it right down to the end, the back mechanism that held the dish, because that has a worm gear in it. There's no way we could really tear it apart without wrecking the whole machine. That's a shaft that comes up right out of the middle and then bends back to hold the dish. And that is the most important part and probably the most expensive part of the whole machine itself. And the way it works is it kind of goes against itself. It's a very, very strange, it's hard to even explain what a worm gear really does. It works like a worm. I'm going to give it a little secret away here. I probably shouldn't do, but I will. This thing is powered by a barbecue spit motor. And yes, that's right, a barbecue spit motor. And that gives it its whole power. And then the next thing was to start on the control panel, because we had no control panel. It was, you know, the one we had was Tom's. So we had to start on that. Now, that was scale 2, so that helped a lot, including the scribing with the thing of saying, what was it, H.G. Wells type situation on there, the whole little thing. That they did the whole thing, and that was like life-size. So it was easy to make a schematic thing almost off of that, just do a stencil. You know. We had the blueprint, so rebuilding the control panel was no real big deal. It came along real well. We had all the lights on top, the lights that flicker in the middle, the lights on the side. Now, an interesting thing to note, though, that is all that control panel did, was just control those lights right there on the control panel that blinked and winked. Now, the back, the dish, the pods, everything else were all handled off stage by a technician. Everybody seems to think it's right from this, but it's not. Here again, remember, it is a prop. And the only thing that was totally fine that we didn't touch at all was the dish. Nothing was really wrong with the dish. It was fiberglass, somehow it lasted. It was okay. And that hasn't been touched to this day. Well, in the movie, if you notice the film, you'll see as the movie kind of progresses, the dish gets more and more warped. You can see it behind Rod doing this a little bit. So they finally had to put big runners behind it as like a suspension thing to hold it from getting any worse, which it did. It won't ever warp any more than it has now. That's it. The chair was gone, totally gone. The story was the guy that got it sold the chair to somebody because he thought it was a real 1900 barber chair. If you turn it upside down, it's got to say on it, Prop Department MGM. I don't know what the guy paid for it. I've heard like $600. I hope that wasn't true. And Tom Sherman built the chair from scratch. He had to build it from just nothing. I mean, we had the plans, but I mean, there was nothing actually physically there. And Lynn Barker and Dorothy Fontana helped him when he started detailing the chair because he had to do a lot of that. Now, when they detailed the chair, Tom ran into a slight problem in that he couldn't find the exact type nurnies, as he called them, to put back on because they weren't made any longer. So he had to put them on there, and then they had to get in there and carve the rest of it in to make it work right. And it did. It matched beautifully. Then the chair was finally antiqued and painted by Tom, who was an expert at this, of making it look old and kind of antiqued and stuff. And they had to put it on the machine and make sure it was going to fit now. It did. It fit perfect. I mean, absolutely. The measurements were just absolutely perfect. The next thing that was going to have to happen was we had to upholster this chair. And a friend of mine, Mark Richards, who created the original Ghostbusters series, by the way, with Forrest Tucker and Larry Storch, and myself as Tracy, this was a hobby of his, was doing this type of stuff. And luckily, my wife, Kathy, found the identical cloth, the color and the texture of the cloth that we needed. So Mark spent quite a bit of time just upholstering the thing and putting it all together. And of course, that's what finished the chair and really made it look, well, exactly like the original. Okay, now we got the machine done before Halloween, thank goodness, and we decided it's got to be for the Halloween show we got to do. And we were trying to figure out how exactly we're going to use it, but we knew we were going to use it. And Mike Miner had done a beautiful set that would revolve around from the lab and become the Morlock Cave, which was industrial foil put over like wooden frames. And then Mike Miner painted this backdrop in about an hour, I think. He was very fast. Then when we got everything done, it was the night of the Halloween show, and the machine sat there looking like a jewel, and the whole set just looked so great. And we knew we were going to have a real good show, because that's what we had planned for. And David Gerald, the fellow that wrote The Trouble with Tribbles for Star Trek, said, "I'll write it if you want." which I thought, hey, that's pretty neat, you know. And plus, he alternated with Charlie Dugdale, the other fellow that played the time traveler. They both alternated, because it was quite a long show, and everybody that, you know, participated in the show all had jobs that they were doing. You know, like, we had a fellow that did great sound, we had a guy who did electronic stuff, Dennis Mirren, who I think has just won his 7th Oscar by now. Yeah, he has, as a matter of fact. Did the lighting stuff for us and all that. I mean, it's just the way it always worked out. I think at that point, we were still kind of growing with our Halloween shows. We had about, close to 3,000 people to come by and see that show. And then, of course, when George Pal and Mrs. Pal dropped by, that was the big thrill for us. I mean, we loved that more than anything, I do believe. And they really enjoyed the show. It was a lot of fun. George even took a trip in the machine. He decided he'd like to go somewhere in there. I don't know how far he got, but we sure had a fun time watching him in there. Especially because he dressed for the occasion with his red and white socks. He only wears those at very special occasions, he told me. And our Morlocks, once in a while, you know, they wanted to meet him, too, because they didn't get to see him that often in the film, so they thought they'd take a look at him now. And of course, George had everything under control. And some of the crew of the Halloween show got around George to get a little picture with him sitting in the machine, and that was the high point of everything. I think that's something we will all remember the rest of our lives.
George loved Bob's Halloween show so much that at Christmas 1976 he had this card made up to share with all his friends, his boyish dream. Santa Claus in the time machine.
You listening, George? You always did love a good party.